What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Ratch Report. It's time to talk about the Toronto Raptors because they have made a blockbuster trade with the Indiana Pacers. The Pascal Siakam rumors are finally over, and Adrian Wojnarowski was reporting that the Indiana Pacers are finalizing a trade to acquire all-star forward Pascal Siakam in a deal that will send Bruce Brown, Jordan Nwora, and 3 first-round picks to the Toronto Raptors. New Orleans will be the third team in the deal, sending Kira Lewis to the Toronto Raptors. Now, I will be talking about Kira Lewis and Jordan Nwora as my initial reaction. Some of the minor aspects of this that a lot of people seem to be missing, as well as my, thoughts on the overall trade. So if you're ready to watch this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you wish to hit the subscribe button as well, that'd be very much appreciated. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, my initial reaction when I saw the trade was a little bit surprised that the Raptors obviously weren't getting Juris Walker. They weren't getting Benedict Mathurin, but the Pacers did have some young, intriguing players in Jalen Smith. Obi Toppin isn't my favorite player, but he's a power forward / whatever he wants to be a forward. And then you also had Andrew Nembhard, who the Raptors were reportedly interested in previous trade talks with the Indiana Pacers. Now, considering after the OG Anunoby trade, the Raptors did trade OG, and they also traded Precious. And given their injuries right now, with Jakob Poeltl missing time, their starting center, and also Christian Koloko, which is supposed to be the backup center, but he has not played the entire season. You would think that the Raptors would want to target someone like a Jalen Smith. He could play power forward, center, but no, the Raptors didn't get any of that. I mean, the 3 first-round picks sound great until you realize, as Shams was reporting here, that details on the Pacers pick to the Raptors, 2 first-round picks via Indiana and via verse of OKC, Utah, Houston, and the Clippers, and the 2026 1 first-rounder protected 1-4, which is, I think, the key prize here. But in terms of the OKC, Utah, Houston, Clippers, I just want to clarify for those who may be confused, that doesn't mean that you're going to get the highest pick out of those 4 teams. That means whichever teams likely finishes the highest in the standings, which could be OKC or the Clippers, their pick will likely be at the end of the first round. So very likely in the 26, 27, 28 range. And yes, people are going to mention that Pascal was drafted with the 27th pick. But in terms of my initial reaction, I was surprised that the Raptors didn't really get some of the younger guys. They didn't get one good young player in this, right? I mean, look, I really like Kira. I know I like Jordan too. He's an intriguing prospect too. I wouldn't call him a prospect, a good young player who I'll get to in just a few minutes. But you would think that the Raptors have been stating, especially after the OG trade, that they want young players over picks, but it seems like no team was willing to give up what they wanted. You had the Kings, who weren't rightfully so going to give up Keegan Murray. You had the Warriors, who didn't want to give up Kuminga, and apparently not even Moses Moody. And then you had the Pacers, who didn't want to give up any of their young players as well. So again, ultimately, it's not a bad return. It's not the greatest return in terms of what the Raptors were looking for, but I'll break down why this isn't a bad return at all. Now, Kevin O'Connor was also tweeting this out too. The Raptors, who, by the way, had 0 picks coming into this draft, now all of a sudden have a ton of draft capital in 2024. Right now, they'd have the 6th pick, 17th, 27, gives them flexibility to move within the draft to target a specific prospect. And also, they did get Detroit's 2nd round pick, which is essentially going to be 31st, 32nd. So they've got 4 picks this year. And like he said, I think maybe the Raptors, who have been known to scout players well ahead of their time, they were known to scout Scotty Barnes in high school, which tells you how advanced their scouting is beyond, some of the other teams. And I know this may lead a lot of fans to confusion because you pretty much traded what first-round pick you had this year to the Spurs for Jakob Poeltl. Mind you, it is top 6 protected, which is a huge gamble, but also because a lot of pundits have been saying that this draft isn't the best. It's one of the weaker draft classes. It seems a little bit confusing, right? But in terms of Bruce Brown, I do want to discuss him as well because he is the young, I wouldn't say, sorry, not the young piece, but he is the player that could ultimately determine the outcome of this trade. And this is something that a lot of teams have been doing around the NBA lately while trading their best player. Now, when people talk about, obviously the key prize, and whenever you're trading all-star players or whenever you're trading superstar players, you're looking for picks, young players. But the underrated aspect is when you're acquiring someone like a Bruce Brown. When you look at Portland Trailblazers, when they traded Damian Lillard, what did they do? They acquired Drew Holiday, flipped him, and then they also got Malcolm Brogdon as well in that deal, which is essentially just pushing a trade further and further. Like, they got a really good return on Drew Holiday. They got a first-round pick in that. Now they're going to trade Malcolm Brogdon as well. And this is what the Raptors are doing. Bruce Brown, they acquired him because he's on a very team-friendly contract because it's a team option. So whichever team decides they want to trade for him, they can easily accept his option if they find it's not working out or he makes too much money for their liking and where they end their season after the playoffs, they can ultimately decline and go to free agency with more money. But Bruce Brown could be intriguing. This pretty much gives the Raptors a little bit of leverage now, right? Because you don't have to necessarily trade Bruce Brown now. You have a team option. You could accept to take it into next season. But playoff teams that may be desperate for a shooting or small forward, you can essentially trade Bruce Brown there and acquire more young players, maybe a second round pick, maybe a first round pick, depending on how desperate a playoff team is. But again, I think the details finally get finalized when Bruce Brown once gets moved. But in terms of some of the other players, I do want to talk about Kira Lewis Jr. and Jordan Nwora as well. Now, let's start by Kira Lewis Jr. because not a lot of people are familiar with who he is. He is actually someone that was drafted in the same draft class as Tyrese Maxey. He was a former lottery pick, drafted 13 overall. Now, looking at his stats here, he clearly has not panned out. And the reason he was actually drafted so high was because of his skill sets, which were actually, ironically, quite similar to Tyrese, who was drafted much later down that draft class. But in terms of his stats here, again, his rookie season, he looked promising, 6 points, 84% from the free throw line. Three-point shot wasn't all that great, but this season with the Pelicans, he just has not looked good at all. I know people are going to look at this and look at why the Raptors would want to acquire a young player. Again, mind you, he's still only 22 years old. He was averaging 3 points, 90% from the field, shooting terrible from the three-point line, and averaging a almost career low, 9.6 minutes a game. I think with the Pelicans, it's one of those situations where they have a lot of young players, also have a lot of young point guards as well with CJ McCollum's not a young, but he's their starting point guard. And then you got backup in Dyson Daniels. You got Jose Alvarado as well. So again, it's kind of tough for Kira to find minutes there. I also want to emphasize on the fact that once players do get moved, sometimes you get rejuvenated. Look at RJ Barrett. I'm not comparing his situation to RJ's in New York, but this could be one of the underrated aspects of the Raptors acquiring. Kira Lewis is exceptionally talented. I just don't feel like he's gotten that opportunity there. Now, in terms of his contract, he does have a team, or excuse me, he will be a restricted free agent. So as you see there, he has an expiring contract, currently making $5.7 million. So it'll be very interesting to see what the Raptors do with him. And he's someone whose skill set is amazing. Again, I want to come up with a separate video just for Kira Lewis because I feel like there's so much talent to him that a lot of people will not look at because they'll just look at stats and they'll see that he's averaging 3 points per game. So he's someone that's fast, can attack the basket. Again, skill sets is similar, obviously not to the same talent as Tyrese, but that gives you kind of an idea of what he's like. He's also only 22, guys, very, very young, right? 6'1" or 6 foot. So he's on the shorter end of a point guard. But let's talk about Jordan Nwora here. Now, I know a lot of people are looking at Jordan Nwora and asking themselves, why would the Raptors want someone like a Jordan Nwora? 25-year-old, he's not exactly young at this stage in his career. He is 6'8", he's 225. The Raptors did lose some depth in that OG Anunoby trade, lost a lot of power forwards, and he's 6'8". He's listed as a small forward. I can't speak too much on his defense, but based off some of the research I've done on him and his highlights, he seems like one of those players that's going to make good cuts. He can hit his three-point shot. He can dribble the ball and handle it a bit at times. But in terms of his stats, I quickly want to highlight he's not having the season this season that he had previously. In previous season, he was averaging 13 points, playing almost 25 minutes a game, shooting 47% from the field. Three-point shot was great, 42%. So again, he's not a spectacular young player, I don't want to say, but he is still someone that could, I think, complement Scottie Barnes' games particularly well. He's going to be someone that can cut, plays exceptionally well off ball. And this season, as you look at his stats here, 5 points, 45% from the field, 30% from the three-point line. Again, not having the season ideally he'd like, but he's also shooting much better from the free throw line at 81%. So again, there's parts of his game which you can see there's definitely something to be intrigued of, right? Like his cutting. When someone has the ball, he's moving off the ball really well. He's also providing a lot of size for the Raptors that do need it. He doesn't seem like he has a frame of a 6'8". He plays a little bit smaller, more like a 6'6" guard, small forward, but he is very interesting. Again, I'm not saying he's going to be someone that the Raptors will keep long term, or even one that when you talk about young players you get in return that you're absolutely excited about, he's going to be one of those complementary role players I think the Raptors will have. But in terms of his contract situation as well, we do have to discuss that because money is a big factor. And that was one of the main factors, actually, why the Raptors traded Pascal Siakam. So very similarly to how we had with Kira Lewis, he he's a UFA, so meaning he's an expiring contract. The Raptors can qualify him for an qualifying offer depending on how well he plays. But again, I'm very intrigued to see Kira Lewis Jr. in particular play with the Raptors. I think Jordan will be a really good complementary role player. Again, he's still very young. He's not too young, but he's also not old enough to be a veteran. So he's kind of the middle ground. So it'll be very interesting. He does provide the Raptors with a little bit of size. Again, I don't know how to feel about this trade. I still needed to kick in particular, I really, really hope that Kira Lewis plays up to the potential that I'm hyping him up in this video. I still think he has exceptional skill sets. And again, I want to come up with a video much later talking about him in particular as well, and some of the other aspects of the Raptors, which really aren't talked about enough in this trade. But I do want to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts on this? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, I do have a trivia question for you today. And that trivia question is, which college did Kira Lewis Jr. play for? Is it A, Washington? Is it B, Alabama? Is it C, Georgia? Or is it D, Kentucky? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. So that will be it for today's video. If you're still watching, guys, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and that will be it for today's video. So thank you once again, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.